What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined as always by Daniel Starkand. Daniel, I have to start off with an apology to you. I know I threw this out there on Twitter, but I feel like this YouTube deserves it. You and I were supposed to go live last Saturday. I totally spaced. I fell asleep before the game ended. You start texting me afterwards, which is terrible in its own right. What made me feel even worse when I woke up, this was the Dodgers losing 12-1. You were forced to endure to the end because of me. So I apologize to you. That was bad on my part.
No, honestly, on nights we usually go live. We're usually texting throughout the game, talking about the game and such, what we're gonna talk about. And that night, there was no text at all. So I was honestly kind of thinking, like, did he fall asleep? Is something wrong? Like, what's going on here? And then the game ended. I sat through the whole thing. I watched Andy Burns pitch an inning in his debut, and then yeah, you were asleep. So I mean, honestly, I was also thinking, like, what are we even going to talk about, like, after that crap show of a game? So I honestly wasn't too bummed when I found out you were asleep. I was just glad you were okay, first of all. But yeah, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about that night, so I don't think anyone's super bummed that we didn't go live.
Fair. Yeah, I don't know who else would have stood up, but stayed up to watch that one. But crazy week for me. Got off our Dodger head schedule a little bit. Should be normalized here. Looking forward. So we got a good show today. I know we usually record this one on Monday, so it's not going to look like our normal Monday show, but it's going to have some of the same features. But just kind of looking back, I mean, the Dodgers have won 7 of their last 9. They played Pittsburgh, Texas, and Philadelphia, so you kind of expect and need them to take 7 out of 9. At this point in the season, the Dodgers are 2 games back of the Giants, who had the fortune of playing the Diamondbacks this past week. The Dodgers get to play the Diamondbacks this upcoming weekend.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the Padres have lost 13 out of 17. They are 4 games back of the Dodgers, 6 of the Giants. And overall, Dodgers 41-27. They've won more than 60% of their games. They have the second best record in the National League. We're going to talk injury issues in a little bit, but kind of before we dive into the nitty-gritty of this last week, yada, 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 how are you feeling? 41-27, second best record in the National League, but 2 games back of the division. At this point in the year, 68 games into the season, how do you feel about how things have gone for the Dodgers?
Yeah, I mean, I feel good. Outside of that one 5-15 stretch or whatever it was, like, they've been pretty damn good. It's unfortunate that the Giants keep
Yeah.
winning here, so we're not in first place, but we're right there, 2 games out. That's nothing. We still play the Giants like 11, 12 more times this season. Like you said, the Padres are struggling right now. That's nice to see. We've talked all season about how ultimately we think that the Padres are going to be the Dodgers' biggest competition.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're struggling and sliding in the standings, that's always good because they're probably going to get hot at some point. But yeah, overall, I'd say I feel good. 41-27. That's not, it's not the best record in baseball. It's not perfect by any means, but considering everything the Dodgers have had to deal with, all the injuries and such, that's not a bad spot to be. They're right in the mix, and they haven't really, truly gotten hot yet, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you point out something that I'm big on, is that I'd much rather be 2 games back of the Giants than the Padres, because I think we're both still skeptical of how sustainable this is. It's not to say the Giants aren't a good team, but, like, are they really going to be the best team in the National League over the next 100 games? Seems unlikely. And so the fact that the Dodgers have a 4-game cushion over the Padres, the team that we expect to be far more competitive from a talent perspective, I think is good news. And yeah, I mean, it's all about perspective, right? If the Giants were not having the miraculous season they were, and we sat here and said the Dodgers are 41-27 and they have a 2-game lead on the NL West, everyone would be fine. There would be no panic. There would be no concern. We know about the injuries. We'll talk a little bit about starting pitching. I do think, like, as unlucky as the Dodgers have been from an offensive injury perspective, the fact that Dustin May, although that's a huge loss, like, that's the only real starting pitching injury the Dodgers have had to navigate, which I think is pretty fortunate. But yeah, I mean, all in all, 41-27, winning percentage over 60%. If you look at any of the statistical projection type stuff, the Dodgers are still 99% chance of making the postseason, still the heavy favorite to win the World Series, still the heavy favorite to win the National League West. And so, yeah, I'm with you. When I look big picture, it's not amazing. It's not a 10 out of 10, but it's an 8.5 out of 10. Like, it's solid. As you said, they had that 5-15 stretch in the middle. Everybody's got their tough spot that they're navigating, the Padres in the midst of theirs right now. But yeah, they're 41-27. They have a win percentage over 60%. They're still the favorites to win the division. 68 games into the season, long way to go. I still feel good about all that.
Yeah, yeah, and they got a kind of a challenging schedule coming up. They're going to play the Padres, the Giants, all those teams. So I think that'll also be really telling
Yeah.
about where they're ultimately going to end up. They got they just kind of they're finishing up an easy stretch
Yeah.
here. They got the Diamondbacks this weekend. Hopefully they could sweep then, and then after that things start getting pretty tough going into the All-Star break.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, here's a plan for the rest of today. A few topics I want to touch on. We'll get to a mailbag question we got sent as well. Want to talk a little bit more about the foreign substances conversation. I know this is not a Dodgers specific, but it's baseball as a whole. We've obviously seen that it's going to have an impact on the Dodgers. So there've been some updates on MLB's plans. I want to talk about that briefly. Dodgers made a couple interesting roster moves over the past week, DFAing some guys that I think would be somewhat surprising, bringing up a couple sort of journeyman types. So we'll talk that. We'll talk about injuries. Obviously, some updates on Bellinger and Muncy, as well as Corey Seager, Scott Alexander. Some good news and some bad news in that conversation as well. And then again, we got a mailbag question about Aroldis Chapman. So there you go. If that's not a teaser for the end of the show, there you go. But let's talk about the foreign substances. You and I had a long conversation about this a week and a half ago, right when sort of the news was coming out that the Dodgers were going to, or that MLB was going to do something. Trevor Bauer's spin rate is down, et cetera, et cetera. Well, MLB updated things saying beginning this upcoming Monday, any pitcher with a foreign substance is going to be suspended for 10 days, 10 games, with pay, which is a pretty standard thing. I know it seems ridiculous to some people, but that's just how this thing works. Here's some of the language. Starting pitchers will have more than one mandatory check per game. Relievers must be checked at the end of the inning when they enter the game or when they are taken out of the game, whichever comes first. As far as what is and is not acceptable, rosin bags on the mound may be used in accordance with the rules. All substances except for rosin are prohibited per the playing rules that clearly state players cannot, quote, apply a foreign substance of any kind to the ball and may not, quote, have on his person or in his possession any foreign substance. Players may not intentionally combine rosin with other substances, for example, sunscreen, to create additional tackiness, or they risk ejection and suspension. So that's the MLB language. Some of the reaction to this has been fascinating. Trevor Bauer had a great interview on Sportsnet LA. If you haven't seen it, it's on their Twitter page. It's about 8 minutes long. But he asked some interesting questions. First of all, he's got some ideas for how to standardize this, which I would hope the MLB would listen to. He says they have been made aware and are not listening to him. But he asked some simple questions like, well, what if I high-five Justin Turner and he's got pine tar all over his hand? What if I go up to bat and I've got pine tar on my bat? What if I apply sunscreen because it's LA and it's a day game and it drips down from my forearm onto my hand? Then what? There's that side of things. Then you've got some other guys around the league. Tyler Glasnow, injured. He blames it entirely on this rule decision, the ability to not put foreign substances on his hand anymore. He said, you doing this in the middle of the season, this is why I've gotten injured. And then Garrett Cole, who's another guy who's part of this conversation, saying, why didn't the commissioner talk to us first? Why not involve us in the discussion on this kind of thing? I've got lots of thoughts. I've got lots of reactions. I'll let you go first. Take it wherever you want to. If you want to talk about the rules, if you want to talk about some of that quotes, I think there's a lot here, and it's a really fascinating thing to watch and to sort of process as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's a lot to this, so I'm not exactly sure where to start. I'll start with Bauer because I watched that video too, and he also put up his own video on his YouTube page talking about it as well. So I encourage anyone who hasn't to watch that because this is clearly a topic that he's thought about a lot. He's put a lot of effort into trying to solve, and he's talked to MLB about it, and they've done nothing up until this point. So I think that kind of goes hand in hand with what Garrett Cole was saying with like, hey, talk to us about this. Like, keep us in the loop. Like, we don't want to be completely in the dark here because the pitchers are really the ones who know exactly what's going on with these foreign substances. They know what they can do, what they don't do. They know what's truly over the line, what isn't. And it seems like MLB just really doesn't have much of a clue, really. They ignored this issue for so long, and now all of a sudden they're trying to step in and be like, hey, we're cutting cold turkey, like everything is gone now, we're cleaning up the game, like they're trying to look like the good guy here when in reality the way they're going about it, in my opinion, is just completely wrong. A lot of the players have mentioned how this shouldn't be happening in the middle of the season. I talked about that when we talked about it last week. And I'm not gonna say that's like I'm not going as far as Glass now as to say like that's straight up the only reason he got injured. Like maybe that's a little far fetched, but I definitely think there's something to that where it's like, you've been doing something all season, 80 innings or whatever, and now all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, you just have to cut cold turkey. You just have to go to using nothing, and that kind of changes the way your arm works. Like, if you can't use a substance, if you have no feel for the ball, that means you're going to try to grip it harder, which puts more pressure on just everything going up your arm because everything's attached. So it definitely can lead to more injuries. With that being said, I know it's basically like Glasnow's basically saying like, "Hey, I've been cheating this whole time. Now you're making me stop and I'm getting hurt." Like that part of it doesn't look great, of course, but I just think if they could collaborate on this, all the players and the league together, I think there is a solution to be had. And Bauer came up with a pretty good one in my opinion, because the way they rub up the baseballs, it only lasts for about 20 to 30 minutes, and if those baseballs are just sitting there for an
Yeah.
hour and it's the fourth inning or whatever, you're getting a really slick baseball that you can't grip. So I think there's solutions to be had. I think Trevor Bauer specifically is a very good person for the situation, because at the end of the day, they've all made it clear they just want an even playing field here. So as long as everything's
Yeah.
equal for everyone, they're fine with it, no matter what the case may be. So, but yeah, I think there's a lot to this. I think MLB's gotten it wrong. I think the players are at fault a little bit here too, obviously, just
Yeah.
because they've been cheating for so long. But at the end of the day, to me, it's on MLB for not doing anything about it till now. So yeah, I feel like I'm talking a lot here. I don't know. Let's get your thoughts here,
Yeah.
Jeff.
Yeah. So I think there's two things to me. First of all, I want to talk about the Garrett Cole quote because if I'm being sort of subjective and standing in the back, Garrett Cole got asked a week and a half ago, point blank, do you use this stuff? And sat there quietly, awkwardly, not answering,
Yeah.
trying, humming and hawing. So now, a week later, I'm supposed to believe that if a month ago Rob Manfred had come to you, Garrett Cole, and said, "Hey, are you using this? We want to have a conversation about it," that Garrett Cole was just going to open up and say, "Absolutely, here's what I'm using, here's how I'm using it, no, there's 0% chance." So it's like you've had, like Bauer, and again, I know this is going to come across a homer because he's a Dodger. Bauer is the only guy that has been outspoken in public about this and saying, "I've got ideas, I've got solutions, this is a problem." So if Bauer says it, it's one thing. But for Garrett Cole, a guy who was asked point blank a week ago, "Did you do this?" and couldn't answer, I'm supposed to believe that like you wanted to be part of the solution for getting this stuff out of the game a month ago, 2 months ago? No chance. I don't believe it. So that's one piece of it for me. But the second piece, and I think this is maybe where my perspective is controversial in some circles. During that Bauer interview, it was so fascinating because I think it was Jerry Hairston who said, "Hey, what's the deal? Like, where is the Players Association on this? The Players Association, how are they letting this happen?" And Bauer's like, "Well, it's a rule. Like, the Players Association has collectively bargained. This is a rule." That's my beef with this whole thing. Like, if you're Glasnow and say, "I got hurt because of this," it's a rule. You've been breaking a rule. This isn't something MLB invented. Now, have they enforced it? Of course not. But I do think that has to be a part of the conversation where it's like, should we feel bad that MLB is sort of changing their enforcement of something in the middle of the season? Sure, I think there's something to that. But they're not changing the rule. The rule has existed. They have just copied the language and said, "By the way, this is something we have not been enforcing, but we are going to start enforcing." They have not rewritten any language. Maybe they've just brought clarity to say, here's what the suspension is going to be. And so that to me is the hard part where it's like, I struggle to have sympathy for a guy like Glasnow for these pitchers because it's like, you shouldn't technically have been able to do this at any point. So I'm supposed to feel bad because you've been doing something for 6 months, a year, 3 years, 4 years, and been getting away with it. And now that MLB is actually enforcing something that you collectively bargained and signed on the dotted line to say, "I'm not going to do this," it's been taken away. And now, oh my gosh, it's MLB's fault that I'm hurt. Like, come on. I can't have any sympathy there. And I get that's where it's going to be controversial. Oh, they didn't enforce it. And to me, it's a rule. Like, if they were rewriting a new rule in the middle of the season, completely different situation. I would still have preferred if they would have rolled out their enforcement of this before the season. But to pretend like that would have made a huge difference, I don't know. I don't see that guys would have changed things until they absolutely needed to. We're at that point. They're changing things. It's not going well for them. I don't know. That's where I land. Am I crazy for thinking this is a rule? I shouldn't feel bad for guys that have been cheating for all this time and now aren't cheating and saying it's now they're getting hurt because they can't cheat anymore.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess the thing I would ask, and I don't even know if you know the answer to this, but was sunscreen part of the rule? Because what Glasnow was talking about, he was saying he only uses sunscreen and rosin, and we know rosin is legal
Yeah.
because the bag is sitting right behind the mound. Like obviously that's legal. So I don't know, was sunscreen part of the rule? Because that's what he was talking about. Was he just mixes sunscreen and rosin to get a grip on the ball? He said that he doesn't use the spider tack and the other stuff because he already has a naturally high spin rate, so he's not concerned about that. So I'm with you when it comes to the spider tack and the other stuff to help with spin rate. But as far as sunscreen and rosin, I feel like even hitters are like on board with that being okay. It just helps pitchers get a grip on the ball. So like no batter wants 96 or 98, coming straight for their head because a pitcher can't grip a ball. Those sunscreen and rosin and stuff like that doesn't really help with spin rate or anything. It just kind of helps you grip the ball when it's super slick.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where I would differ there. I don't really view that as being against the rules. I'm definitely with you when it comes to like the spider tack and stuff, and that's more of the Garrett Cole conversation. I'd say like I feel like he's very clearly or was very clearly using the extra type stuff. So I'm with you on those. Like that stuff is clearly against the rules. I don't know if it was really clear, at least amongst the players, like is sunscreen against the rules? Because like you're out there, it's a hot day or whatever.
Yeah.
Like obviously you want to put on sunscreen to avoid getting burnt. So I just think MLB hasn't been super clear on what the rule is. They definitely haven't enforced it. Like we've seen guys get caught. Like you see guys with pine tar on their hat all the time. You
Yeah.
see a ball stuck to Yachty's, chest protector, and nothing ever came of those things. So I definitely get what you're saying. The rule has been in place. The pitchers chose to use these things knowing that. But I also think MLB should shoulder some of the blame just because they never enforced those rules. They never made it clear
Yeah.
to the players, what is and what isn't acceptable.
Yeah. So, and to clarify, the language has always been no foreign substances. Now, I
Hmm.
think what they've done in this sort of new update is make clear, like, hey, sunscreen is a foreign substance. Like, we are defining a
Right.
foreign substance as anything beyond rosin. Now, I am the
Right.
first to say, look, sunscreen, that's going to be challenging because, like, guys need to be wearing sunscreen. Like, you think about these day games and it's 100 degrees and you're standing out on the mound for hours at a time. Like, of course. And
Right.
so I hear that. That's the rule has been no foreign substances. They have since clarified, hey, this has
Mhm.
always included sunscreen.
Mhm.
And yeah, to please hear, because I'm not saying MLB is blameless in this. Like, if you have a rule, you
Yeah,
should be enforcing it. That's the way I approach. I'm a rule follower type of guy. If you give me a rule, I'm going to follow it. Um, and so it's kind of a both and. Like, yes, MLB absolutely should have done a better job of being consistent and enforcing this. But at the same time, like to me, that does not mean that now I have to have all this sympathy for guys that have been breaking a rule simultaneously. Like I can do both. I could say,
Yeah.
hey, MLB, you've blown it.
Right.
This has been a problem for 4 years. But also like, hey, Glasnow, hey, Cole, like I have no sympathy for you. Zero. No sympathy. Like you're asking for sympathy. You're not going to get it from me because this has been a rule. You've been cheating. Whether or not like you could get away with it to me is completely irrelevant to the conversation of on your end, should you have done this? Now, again, whether Glasnow actually got hurt because of it, Bauer, and you have both indicated that there's probably something to that. But again, it's like the reason your arm is not trained to do what it should be doing is because you've been using something you shouldn't have been using. So this is obviously going to keep coming up. I'm super fascinated. We're going to record on Monday. That night is when we're going to start. And I mean, I'm just curious. First week of enforcement, more or less than 3.5 pitchers that get ejected for foreign substances.
I'd
Total
say
in all of
less because
baseball. All of baseball.
yeah, I'd say less just because I feel like it's clear to pitchers now,
Yeah.
like that you can't use that stuff, and I don't think anyone want to get anyone, no one wants to get suspended just because then you're hurting your team. So I think we've already started to see like this stuff get cleaned up. I know like Monday's the official day, whatever, but I feel like it's been cleaned up for at least a week or two
Yeah.
now. We've been seeing the drop in spin rates. We've been seeing hitters are starting to come around here. So I think the issue is more or less cleaned up. It's just I think guys are just kind of upset the way it kind of happened. Definitely think pitchers are gonna clean it up now just because they want to avoid a suspension just because that affects their whole team.
Yeah, I think I'm torn because on one hand I'm with you. I think pitchers have gotten, you've seen RPM start to dip, so guys are clearly getting ahead of this. On the flip side, I think MLB, you come out with this policy, like you're going to want some pelts on the wall, so to speak. Like you're going to want some guys that you can point to and say, hey, look at us. We're actually cracking down on it. Here's some
Yeah.
suspensions. The flip side is, and there's no appeal process, so maybe they don't have to worry about this, but if you go and suspend the wrong guys for the wrong stuff, and it comes out somehow one way or another that like these guys weren't actually cheating, right? That Bauer had a thing where he's like, look, sweat and rosin, I can make a baseball stick to my hand. Like if you
Yeah.
get to that type of stuff, I think it's where it's going to get dicey. So I'll be
Yeah.
super fascinated to watch.
Yeah, yeah, and one other thing Bauer mentioned up is how like the umpires are kind of the
Yep.
judge, jury, and executioner here, and they don't really have training, on the matter at
That's a
hand. Like
great
it's
point.
not like they had a full off season to practice, recognizing substances and such. So I'll be curious to see how umpires handle it. Like Bauer demonstrated, like only rosin and sweat is enough to get a ball to stick to you. So is an umpire going to see that and think that they're using something else? So I'll just be curious to see how that gets handled. I don't think it's a good thing for umpires to have even more
Yeah.
power. I think I was hoping we were trending in the direction of them having less power with robot umps and stuff like that. But yeah, they're the ones who could get guys in trouble here. So I'll be curious to see how that plays
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. It's a great point. And like, yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it. Like Bauer suggesting like almost like a chemical test. Like that's not what's going to be happening. It's going to be
Yeah.
umpires looking. I mean, even when Bauer's doing the interview, he's holding his hand up. I mean, there's like black stuff all over his hand. And it's like, MLB umpires have a far better understanding of what rosin is than I do. You probably have a much better understanding having pitched. Like I was like, I honestly, I don't know what rosin is. So like that's what makes it so cool. It's like, oh, you can use rosin. I just assumed it was something that like dried your hand so that you weren't sweating. Well, apparently there's some sort of tackiness element to it, at least when combined with sweat. And so who knows? I'm with you. The umpire piece is going to be fascinating. And I'll be so curious 2 weeks from now if we're sitting here, how many people have been suspended? Does MLB have pelts on the wall? And what does that look like? But enough foreign substance talk. It's going to be a conversation piece. Hopefully, guys just stop using and it doesn't become an issue and they can get some more clarity in the offseason. But I doubt that conversation is go away. Let's move to the last week, specifically to the Dodgers. We're not going to do stock up and stock down traditionally the way that we've done it of late. We'll save that for Monday. But just a couple guys, couple groups that stood out to me that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. Walker Buehler and Clayton Kershaw. The last two starts for both of these guys, in my opinion, have been really good. I know Kershaw in particular last night, 8 hits is not great, but let me give you the total numbers. His last two starts, Walker Buehler, 13 innings pitched, 7 hits, no earned runs. 13 innings pitched, 7 hits, no earned runs. Just 7 strikeouts, which we can talk about that. Kershaw, on the other hand, 12 innings pitched, 11 hits, 2 earned runs, 18 strikeouts. So Buehler, it's fascinating because on one hand, Kershaw's striking out a batter and a half per inning, which is remarkable for a guy his age with this velocity that he's throwing with. On the flip side, Buehler has no earned runs, but 7 strikeouts in 13 innings. We've talked about this as a whole. So when you look at Kershaw or Buehler, I'll let you take this whichever direction you want. What have you seen from those two guys, and what stands out to you?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with Buehler because like you said, the no earned runs, that's pretty impressive. And I think there's a stat like he hasn't lost a decision since like
Oh, we're gonna get
September
there.
of 2019.
I've got a question for you around that particular stat coming up
Okay.
at the end of the show.
Okay, yeah. Well, okay, but yeah, obviously we don't put a whole lot into pitcher wins, but I definitely think there's something to that. Like obviously if they haven't lost
Yeah.
he hasn't lost a decision in that long, that means he's doing something right. So he's been great all year really. He's got like a 2.4 ERA, 6-0. But really his last couple starts he's like you said, the strikeout numbers are down, which I'm not gonna say it's concerning, but obviously you like that to be up with Buehler, who's known to strike out guys. But I think there's more ways to pitch than just to strike guys out, and I think him getting through 6 innings and all his start, that's been a huge plus too, and that's partly because of he's pitching to contact more. He's keeping his pitch count down. We've seen him. I think it was in the Pittsburgh start. I think he was like his first couple innings, he didn't strike anyone out, but he was at like 18 pitches through 2 innings or something like that. And that shows like he's able to get deep in the games, which has been huge. You mentioned how the Dodgers starters outside of Dustin May have been able to stay healthy. They've been able to give length. That's been huge for this team. That's, kept the bullpen fresh, or outside of the bullpen days where they've been kind of taxed. But the reason you're allowed to do, or you're able to do that, is because of how good the other starters have been and going deep. So I've been really impressed with Buehler. He's really starting to become a complete pitcher, I'd say. I think the strikeout numbers still will come up as the season goes along. He's had outings where he struck out a lot, but I think just the last couple, I don't know. I don't know an exact reason. Like
Yeah.
his stuff still looks the same to me. He's still getting outs, which is the most important thing, but the strikeouts just haven't been there. I think we'll keep an eye on that and see if it becomes a trend.
Yeah.
But right now, I don't think it's a huge concern.
Let me let
And
me let me ask
Kershaw,
you about Bueller real quick.
Kershaw,
Just
okay,
I'll follow up. I mean, strikeouts, walks. A lot of people that study this stuff tend to say that strikeouts and walks is almost the most predictive thing that you can look at. Because it's basically the things that the pitcher can control, and there's a belief that like when the ball gets put in
right.
play, there's only so much control you have. Obviously, better pitchers have lower exit velocity, so there is something to that. But I guess when I look at Bueller and I see 7 innings, 2 hits, 2 strikeouts, that was his second to last start. And then last week, just 5 strikeouts and 6 innings pitched. I guess my question is like, are you convinced this is sustainable, that the success is going to continue even if the strikeout numbers don't pop back up? Because he has not had a stretch of his career anything like the stretch he's currently on with the strikeout numbers as low as they have been. So, yes, I know the ERA is good. And yes, I know like the innings pitch is great. And there is something to maybe a guy not trying to strike everyone out, trying to conserve his pitch count. He's a really good pitcher. I guess I'm just curious, do you have any concerns about sustainability of this level of success, given that his strikeout, and I could go back and look at his whiff rate, but I would imagine his whiff rate is way down from normal. So any concerns on the Bueller front about sustainability?
Yeah, I think Bueller was asked that same exact question if he was concerned about his whiff rate being down, and he didn't really express too much concern. I think I need to see if it becomes more of a trend here. I know his strikeout numbers have been down all year, but they weren't as down as significantly as, like you said, only 2 strikes in 7 innings.
Yeah.
And then or so a total of 7 strikeouts in 13 innings, like that's abnormally low, I'd
Yeah.
say. Like if that became a trend, I think it would be a little concerning. But I think overall, like as long as he's striking out around a batter an inning, like that's good right there. It's not on par with his full career and when he's been at his best, specifically in the postseason. But I think the way he's commanding the ball overall has been fine.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure why he's getting less swing and misses, but I think I need to see it become more of a trend before I'm truly concerned.
Yeah, and so just for context here, his strikeout per 9 innings this year is 8.32. That is down 2 full strikeouts from last year, which was down from the year before. 2018 was 9.9, 2017 11.57. So he's down a full 2 strikeouts, which is, as you said, a pretty significant number. His strikeout percentage is 50th. I mean, the baseball savant numbers are not positive here. Average exit velocity 51st percentile, hard hit percentage 41st percentile, expected on base average 55th percentile, expected ERA 55th percentile, barrel percentage 37%. Basically, the only number in red is the walk percentage, which is 90th percentile. So at least he is not walking guys. But again, these numbers are, there's some concerning stuff. And again, I think
Mhm.
like when you have a guy who's got the sort of the quality that he does, I think, you kind of hope that, hey, maybe this is going to sort of work itself out. The whiff percentage is down. It's 25.9 this year, down from 28.4 last year, but not too far off from sort of 2017, 18, and 19. So I guess that's some positive news, but man, and I know we've already done a deep dive on this, so we don't have to go back into it. But just looking at that, some of the stuff, yeah, I mean, I guess what I hear you saying is let's like, yes, it's concerning right this second, but let's see if it corrects over the rest of the season. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's fair. And yeah, I guess a lot of those stats are kind of show that he's gotten a little lucky, I guess.
Yeah.
Like if he's only 51st percentile in hard hit percentage and he's not missing a lot of bats, that means
Right.
guys are hitting it hard just right at guys. So I guess we'll just have to see if this continues. We're less than halfway through the season here.
Yeah.
I think obviously the most important thing is the run prevention, and he's been elite at that.
Yeah.
He's got a 2.4 ERA. So I guess sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but I think over the long haul, we'd rather see him be good than lucky.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just see, how this plays out moving forward, I guess.
Yeah. So and then on to Kershaw, who's kind of the opposite, right? He gives up a couple runs, but the strikeouts are elite. So where are you at on the Clayton Kershaw sort of roller coaster of a season?
Yeah. I was literally just gonna say that Kershaw's been the opposite. It's been kind of a weird year for him because he's looked really good at times, and then he's struggled at times. And it's not like he's walking guys and the strikeout numbers are still up. He's still missing bats at
Yeah.
an elite level. He's just getting hit sometimes. He did a good job last night. He battled to get through six. It was pretty clear he didn't have his good stuff. His curveball wasn't working or whatever. So it was good for him to get through six there. I know the Dodgers lost, which is never fun, but he battled and got through six, struck out nine, which he's been doing a lot recently.
Yeah.
So I'd say with Kershaw, you just hope. I don't know what his hard hit percentage is or what percentile he's at there, but you hope that kind of comes down a little and stabilizes. I guess he like we were saying, he's the opposite of Buehler. He's kind of been getting unlucky
Yeah.
because he's missing bats a lot. So I guess he's another. We're just gonna kind of have to wait and see because he's had ups and downs this year. I think overall he's been good, but not. He hasn't been the elite Kershaw that we're used to. I think his ERA is like 3.3, which would
Yeah.
be his worst since his rookie season. But he's still been good. With this team, you're gonna win. You're winning so many games that like you don't need him to be an elite Cy Young guy. You just need him to be good, which is what he has been. So yeah, I think I'm not really concerned with Kershaw at all. You just kind of hope, he starts the unluckiness, the hard hit balls that start, kind of starts coming down.
It is funny looking at his baseball savant because it is very much the opposite of Walker Buehler. They both are elite walk percentage, but Clayton Kershaw has a lot more red. Now, the exit velocity and hard hit are close to league average, 59th percentile and 43rd percentile. But when you get into expected stats, he's up around the 80th percentile. His whiff percentage is 85th percentile. So his strikeout percentage, 77th percentile. So there is an element of, if you're just looking at StatCast numbers, which is not the only place that you should look, obviously run prevention is a part of this and your ERA does matter, right? But when you look at sort of projecting it out to the future, there's a lot in Kershaw's profile that you kind of like. Again, the hard hit and exit velocity is still not great, but the whiff percentage is high. The walk percentage is low. The strikeout percentage is high. I mean, like career high almost, best numbers that he's had in 3 or 4 seasons on that front. So, it's just a fascinating. It's so funny to look at these two guys next to each other because one guy has all the stuff in the world and all the velocity, that you could ever ask for, basically, and the other guy's the 33-year-old that's relying on like a 92-mile-an-hour fastball and a slider that nobody can hit, and yet one guy is getting results, the other guy isn't, but sort of the inverse seems to be happening behind the scenes. So something fascinating to watch as the season goes on for sure. A couple other guys I want to mention from this past week. Last time we were on here, I quoted Dave Roberts as saying, hey, Mookie Betts is going to get a home run at some point in the next few days. Well, Dave Roberts was right. In his last 31 plate appearance, Mookie has 7 hits, 5 walks, 3 homers, 8 runs, and 4 RBIs. So an on-base percentage that's really, really good. 3 home runs across the past 7 to 10 days as well. It has been a bit like there's, maybe in an 8 or 9 game stretch, he's had like hits in 3 of those games. He has gotten a walk on base in most of those, but have you seen anything in Mookie? One of the home runs is like right into the corner, so it's kind of like, what have you seen from Mookie? Same question. How sustainable is this? Do you feel like we've turned a corner and we're getting Mookie Betts of old, or is this like, hey, he's looked good for a couple weeks, let's pump the brakes on MVP Mookie here?
Yeah, I'd say the latter. Because I feel like there's been certain times, throughout the season where he's gotten hot for like 5 days or a week or whatever, and you're like, all right, we got Mookie back.
Yeah.
And then he kind of goes back to what he was before. So I need to see kind of similar to the Buehler Kershaw stuff. I just need to see more before I fully declare like MVP Mookie back. But it's definitely encouraging to see him leave the ballpark 3 times. His power numbers have been down this season. We weren't sure what the reason is. Is it because of his injuries? Is it because of the dejuiced ball? Is it because of pitchers using substances, or probably a combination of all those? So it's good to see the power coming around a little bit. 3 homers over the last week. One of them was probably one of the moments of the season so far. Him hitting a go-ahead home run in the first game with fans. Full capacity fans back at Dodger Stadium. His first game in front of a full capacity stadium as a member of the Dodgers. The crowd went crazy there. That was a special moment for me. But yeah, I think he's playing well, and that's definitely good to see with so many other key guys out with injuries right now. We talked a couple weeks ago. I think when Muncy first went down, you were like, who needs to pick up
Yeah.
the load there? And two guys I mentioned were Mookie and Cody Bellinger, and Cody Bellinger got hurt shortly after that. So I guess it's on Mookie here. I mean, other guys are hitting well too. I think the Dodgers have like four guys with an OPS over 1,000 over the last week. Lux is swinging it well.
Nice.
Justin Turner's swinging it well. So that's a good sign. But yeah, Mookie's the ultimate table setter at the top of that lineup. We know he's going to get on base, like you mentioned. He's still working his walks. His on base percentage is still on par with what it's always been. It's just been the slugging has been down. So it's good to see the power finally starting to come around. But I just need to see more of it before I put him in the MVP race here.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And yeah, and just to assume that he's going to just jump back to what he's always been. You're starting to see glimpses. He's getting on base. Like I said, he is hitting for power. I mean, we could say, hey, that one down the right field line where it goes 331 feet and it counts as a home run. I mean, he's probably had others that are 400-foot flyouts. So those things tend to even themselves out over the year. But yeah, I'm with you. Encouraging, but not like taking my foot off the gas. Like, okay, fine, we've arrived. We're good to go. One other shout out I want to give, the bullpen. Tony Gonsolin had 2 starts. Neither of them went necessarily fantastically. I did a live post-game show after the last one. Gonsolin in his last 2 starts, 5 1/3 innings total. Just hasn't been able to get all of his pitches going. I'm not overly concerned about him long term, but what it's meant is that the bullpen needs to step up. Well, the Dodgers won both of those games in incredibly low-scoring fashion. So on June 9th, the bullpen goes 7 1/3, allows 1 hit, no earned runs. That was Gonzalez, Price, Kelly, Trinan, and Jansen. And on June 14th, the bullpen goes 5 1/3, 4 hits, no earned runs. Price, Kelly, Gonzalez, Trinan, Nelson, and Jansen. And you look at that group, and Dave Roberts has said, hey, Gonsolin's at 70 pitches. We expect his next one to be closer to 90. It's just about being more efficient. Roberts is not planning these out as bullpen games. Like, they've become bullpen games, but he's like, hey, we're expecting Gonsolin to give us length now, starting now. So Gonsolin is a separate conversation we don't necessarily have to have today. I guess I would just say the bullpen, like, I've been impressed. I mean, I know the numbers overall haven't been great. That 12-1 game, like, there's some of that stuff in Andy Burns' numbers and Nate Jones, who we're going to talk about here in a moment. But Price, Kelly, Gonzalez, Trinan, Nelson, and Jansen. We all know how I feel about Joe Kelly. I think he looked great in that game. He looked nasty. We know how I feel about Gonzalez. We know how I feel about Nelson and Jansen, Trinan, Price. It feels like the bullpen's at the best point it has been all season. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I definitely think that's fair. And you mentioned, those 5 guys that I'll put that top 5 up with just about any team in the league. Is it 6 guys,
Kelly,
whatever
if you
it
count
is.
Joe Kelly.
Oh, I wasn't counting Kelly, but if you want to,
no.
if you want to,
I don't want to count him. Top 5, great. Top 5 sounds good to me.
No, but the top 5, I trust all 5 of those guys in basically any situation. They've all been outstanding. So Jimmy Nelson in particular, that guy is just nasty. He's striking out everybody. So he's really worked. He wasn't in a leverage type spot for most of the year, and he's kind of worked his way into it. And now he's in that in that core 5. He's a guy you trust in any situation. So I think that's been huge. And having Joe Kelly and Phil Bickford as your 6th and 7th guys. I know you're a big Bickford guy. He had 1 or 2 bad outings, but he rebounded nicely the last couple. He threw 2 shutout innings last night. So having him and Kelly, who aren't always consistent, but have shown that they're going to give you 3 or 4 good outings and then have a bad outing or 2, which is fine when you're talking about your 6th or 7th guys. Like, obviously you're not expecting those guys to be lights out, but I think the Dodgers bullpen as a whole has been huge. You mentioned how Gonsolin hasn't given them the length they had hoped.
Yeah.
He's what'd you say, 5 1/3 innings and 2 starts or whatever. So they basically we declared the end of bullpen games when Gonsolin got back, but that hasn't been the case because he hasn't been able to give any length. So they've still been going with bullpen games, and the bullpen's been great. So hopefully they could keep that up. Hopefully those guys could stay healthy. I think that's the main key. Like, I think we've seen when the Dodgers bullpen has run into trouble, it's when multiple of those top 5 guys or whatever have been out. So I think the bullpen's in a really good spot right now. I still think that's going to be something they're going to address at the deadline as well. Maybe bring in 1 or 2 more guys. But yeah, I think overall as a whole, the bullpen is looking really good right now.
Yeah, and we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Scott Alexander due to come back in the next few weeks, and Corey Knebel. Some encouraging news about Knebel. Not due back for a while, but if he's due back at all, that would be an upgrade over kind of where I was at. A couple transaction notes from this week just to clean stuff up. Dennis Santana and Nate Jones, both designated for assignment, taken off of the 40-man roster. They are on waivers. Nate Jones, this is a guy a couple weeks ago that I think a lot of Dodger fans were like, hey, not bad.
Yeah.
Total 8 2/3 innings, 8.31 ERA. His last 2 outings, an inning and 2/3, 6 earned runs, 7 base runners. Santana, the flip side, this is a guy the Dodgers drafted and developed. Has had ups and downs as far as a prospect goes, has had moments where you look at his stuff and it's nasty, other moments where he can't throw strikes, and that was ultimately his problem. Dave Roberts even said so. This season, 15 innings pitched for Santana, an ERA of 6. But here's the number to know: 6.6 walks per 9 innings while striking out 4.8. So he walked more guys than he struck out. He's walking, an unbelievable amount of guys, almost 1 per inning, getting close to, 1 per inning. So can't happen. We can talk about the guys that they brought up, Souza and Burns, here in a moment. But I think Jones, Santana, any surprises there? Any worries that these moves are going to come back to bite the Dodgers?
I mean, I was a little surprised just when you first see it, that's what they did. You're a little surprised, but then when you kind of dig into the numbers, you just mentioned them. Not good for either guy,
Yeah.
so I guess not. I'm not surprised. Dennis Santana, he's a guy we've been optimistic about. Is it? I guess the word I would use. You see the stuff and you think, this guy should be really good, but those numbers are not only bad, they're awful.
Yeah.
Having a strikeout rate that low with the stuff you have is embarrassing. And the walk rate, that's just unacceptable as well. So, and there's also been some immaturity concerns with Santana as well. So I think just overall, when you look at the whole package, I think it was just time to cut him loose. He wasn't, they sent him back to AAA. You hope, maybe he could figure something out and become successful again. That wasn't the case. He was even worse in AAA than he was in the big leagues. So I think it was just time for him. It's unfortunate, but we wish him the best of luck wherever he ends up. I don't think anyone has claimed him yet, so who knows? Maybe the Dodgers will be able to keep him if no one picks him up. I'd say Santana is more likely to get picked up just because of how young he is, and that optimism, I'm sure, is still there amongst other people in baseball as well. Because you see, he throws 96 with movement. You think if he could just figure out where it's going, he'll be successful. But that just hasn't happened to this point. And Jones, he started off well. He had that great outing in San Francisco, on the first night he got called up, and it's been kind of downhill since then. He's an older guy. He's like 35. He's been through it before. So I guess he's another guy that you just hope no one claims him, and then you could, send him to AAA. And then if you run into some injury concerns or whatever, then you could call him back up. But I think given the current state of the bullpen, which we just talked about, the move made sense. There wasn't really any real leverage opportunities for Jones. And he just wasn't getting it done, his last few outings at least. So I think the moves made sense. You need the extra position players right now, with so many guys out with injuries.
Yeah, and so the corresponding moves, obviously Luke Raley got brought up, I believe, when Bellinger was put onto the injured list. Then the other 2 moves were for guys that are brand new to the Dodgers: Steven Souza Jr., Andy Burns. Both guys that have been tearing it up in AAA, both guys who are sort of journeymen. Souza had a slash line of 279, batting average 444 on base, and 603 slug in AAA. He had 6 home runs and 68 at bats. This is a guy who hit 30 home runs at the major league level in 2017 with the Rays, had a rough 2018, missed all of 2019, played just 11 games last year. Burns, on the other hand, debuted in 2016, no hits for him, goes to Korea in 2017 and 18, AAA with the Blue Jays in 2019, nothing in 2020. This year, 330 batting average, 427 on base, 598 slug, with 5 home runs and 97 at bats at AAA. Souza is a left field, right field guy. Burns is sort of your Chris Taylor, play all over the infield, play all over the outfield kind of guy. It's interesting because we're going to talk Scott Alexander here in a moment. He's due to be activated somewhere around July 2nd. They will need to make room on the 26-man roster for him. Corey Knebel as well. Again, that's another month or so beyond that. But either of these guys intriguing to you, and any belief that either of these guys has a chance to stick? I mean, for me personally, I understand the hesitancy because they needed to be added to the 40-man roster. But now that they're there, I mean, I feel better about both of these guys, I think, than I do Luke Raley.
Yeah, I'd say I'm more optimistic about Souza just because he has the past success. Yeah. You mentioned the 30-homer season. That was in 2017, so that was only 4 years ago. He's dealt with a lot of injuries since then. Yeah. But you mentioned the AAA numbers. I'm just gonna caution like the PCL, or I don't think they call it the PCL anymore. But whatever the AAA league is, it's very hitter friendly. So I think those numbers, just because they look great, doesn't necessarily mean we're getting
Yeah.
Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb coming up here. But hey, who knows? We'll see. The team definitely needs bodies at the moment. They got three of their top 4 or 5 hitters on the IL right now. So you need someone. You hope that you could kind of, you know, ride that hot streak that they have going
Yeah.
in AAA right now in the big league level, which is obviously a tall task because big league pitching is a lot better than AAA pitching. We've seen it. You mentioned Luke Raley. He's a perfect example. Like he hasn't hit a lick in the big leagues this year. And then as soon as they send him down to AAA, all of a sudden, he's mashing. He's hitting him and Souza had a game where they hit 3 homers each
Yeah.
in the same game. So I think that just tells you right there. That tells you the difference between AAA and the big leagues. But we'll see with these guys. They could use the depth right now. They have some versatility, so they can move around a little bit. And I think you mentioned this earlier. Like our expectations aren't super high for the back of the bench guys.
Yeah.
We've seen zero production out of those guys this season, whether it be Luke Raley, Sheldon Noisy, DJ Peters. Those guys haven't been able to do hardly anything at all. So if these guys could give you anything, that's already a positive right there. And I don't think Bellinger and Muncy are going to be, out too long, maybe just a couple weeks here. So I guess it's kind of an audition for them to see, hey, you get 2 weeks here. If you could perform, you could stick around. If not, you'll get the DFA. So I guess we'll see. But any production is better than what the Dodgers were getting before.
Yeah, I think it might have been Max Bay on Twitter, but he tweeted, he's like, I've never fully understood the concept of a quad A player, which is like this term for guys that are career AAA guys that make it up. But he said, I'm beginning to understand it when I watched Luke Raley swing through 3 straight fastballs at the major league level.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, there is a jump from AAA to the major leagues, and some guys just can't make it. As you said, Souza, I think you look at the numbers, like, hey, he's done it before. Obviously, he's absolutely dominating at AAA, which doesn't mean nothing. It's like you said, you just take it with a grain of salt. So be curious to see how those guys do. I'm with you. I think Souza's the name, maybe just because he's a familiar name that I was more intrigued by. He's obviously had slightly better numbers than Burns, but who knows? Both of those guys, I love the story behind both of them making it back. Andy Burns getting his first career hit after debuting in 2016, not getting a hit and kind of wondering, like, am I ever going to get another chance? He gets a chance. His hit, like I believe his was like borderline error, but hey, they gave him the hit. Doesn't really matter. So shout out to Andy Burns. Let's do some injury updates just to throw this out there, and then we'll do some big deal, no deal stuff and close out. I thought this was really good from Fabian Ardaya of The Athletic talking about Dodger injuries. He pointed out Mookie Betts, Max Muncy, Cody Bellinger, Justin Turner, and Corey Seager. They have been all in the same lineup this year just 3 times. So out of 68 games, just 3 times have the Dodgers had their 5 best hitters. And I mean, if you add Will Smith into that mix, who knows? The number might go down. 4 of the 5 have been just 30 times this year. So, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Obviously, they had a stretch when Seager was the only guy injured there. Max Muncy, some stats, was the 22nd player to go to the injured list. I believe Cody Bellinger's new stint on the injured list was the 25th time they've had to put a guy on the injured list. The Dodgers are 7th in baseball in missed games. They're 2nd in lost value, just to the Mets. And this doesn't even include Mookie Betts, who has missed 12 games this year but has never gone on to the injured list. So that's sort of the bad news. Some updates that I think are encouraging. Corey Seager expected to start a rehab assignment about a week from now. So they're sort of hoping that he could be back with the Dodgers in about 2 weeks. So end of June, maybe very beginning of July. Scott Alexander, eligible to return from the 60-day IL on July 2nd. Sounds like he would have been ready sooner, but he's on the 60-day, so he's probably 2 weeks away. And then the update that I've kind of hinted at, Corey Knebel played catch up to 90 feet on Wednesday. They're hoping he's back in August, which it would be an absolute boost when you're talking about going and getting a guy at the deadline. I mean, Knebel would be essentially that and probably better. So definitely positive news there. We've kind of touched on the overall bad luck the Dodgers have had injuries. Again, they're 41-27. They have the 2nd best record in the National League. But Seager, good news. Knebel, good news. Alexander, good news. If we want to go the optimistic way, there is some good injury news. You can see on the horizon a day when the Dodgers are really close to full health.
Yeah. I mean, I think the injuries is the reason we're so optimistic, even though the Dodgers are here June 17th. They're in 2nd place by 2 games. You know, who knows? Like you mentioned, they've only had those 5 guys in the lineup together 3 times. Like maybe
Yeah.
that will continue all year. Let's hope not.
Yeah.
But I think that's the reason to be optimistic is they haven't had their main team hardly at all this season. And when they do have their main team, that's clearly the best team in baseball, I feel like. So I think that's the reason for optimism. Those updates you just gave, those are all positive signs. Knable in particular, I think that, like you mentioned, that'll be like adding a trade deadline boost right there
Yeah.
to your bullpen. And I think obviously getting hurt is never a good thing, but who knows? You know, maybe it's a blessing in disguise because Knable hasn't truly pitched a full season since like 2018. So I think the injury, while not ideal, is kind of serving as a way to limit his innings. He'll come
Yeah.
back, hopefully at least he'll come back in August or September, nice and fresh and ready to go for a postseason run there. So I think that'll be a huge addition to the pen, in addition to the other guys they have that are throwing the ball well down there. So yeah, I think all those updates being so positive is just more reason for optimism here. I think it's clear neither of us are in any sort of panic mode here. I
Mm-mm.
think we're both feeling real good about where the Dodgers are at, even though things haven't exactly gone according to plan this season.
Yeah, well, the note about Knable is a perfect segue. I've got 3 big deal, no deal questions for you of all different kinds. But speaking of workload, I think it's a perfect transition. I didn't realize in this until I saw a question that was asked of Dave Roberts. Julio Urias has already set a career high in inning pitched this season. So he's at 84 innings pitched. 2019, he threw 83 and a third, if you include the playoffs. Last year, including playoffs, he threw 78. So we're only 68 games into the season. There is 100 games left. The Dodgers have 5 starting pitchers. Obviously, could they go and get a Josiah Gray for a spot start here and there, Andre Jackson, someone like that? Sure. But big deal or no deal to you that Urias has already set a career high in innings? Are you concerned at all about that?
Yeah, I definitely think it's something to be concerned about, and we've seen it with his recent starts. His last, his string of his last 4 starts or whatever haven't been anywhere near his best. So I think it's a little concerning, especially when you consider we're only 68 games in, so we're not even halfway, and he's already reached his career high. I know the leash is off this season. You want to let him go as long as he's healthy, like he's going to pitch. But I definitely think once the second half of the season comes around, I definitely think they should and they will find ways to limit his innings, whether it be skipping his turn in the rotation once, whether it be putting him on the IL for a couple weeks,
Yeah.
hopefully not because of an actual injury, but maybe a shadow IL type of situation, just to limit his innings. Because I don't think while the leash is off and it's good to see him healthy and throwing as many innings as possible, I don't know if it's the safest thing in the world for him to throw 200 regular season innings and then 25 more in the postseason when he's never come anywhere close to that. So I definitely think that'll be something to watch for in the second half. How are they going to find ways to limit his innings? And I also think Walker Buehler is another candidate for that as well. I know he's thrown a lot more than Julio. Like he's had full seasons of 150, 160 innings or whatever. But he's on pace to eclipse 200 this season, which he said at the beginning of the year that's what he wants to do. So I don't know if he'll be cool with, him
Yeah.
getting skipped or whatever. But I definitely think when you're a team that's expecting to make the postseason, you got to find those ways because you want to have guys fresh, in October when it matters the most.
Yeah, and especially Urias and Buehler. Those are two, you could argue the 2 most important pitchers the Dodgers have come October based on what Urias has done historically from a bullpen perspective last year. So, yeah, it's something to watch. I mean, and again, it's not like they have like a 7-man rotation, guys. They've made it clear
Yeah.
Jimmy Nelson and David Price are not going to be starters. So if you want to do bullpen game type stuff, you can. Otherwise, they've got to make room on the 26-man roster. Again, Alexander's going to take up a spot when he comes back. Seager is on the 10-day IL, so he will not need sort of a 26-man spot or a 40-man spot, opened up. But Alexander will, Knable will. So it's not like they have just free roster spots to just call a guy up. So something to keep an eye on there. This was a fun question. You referenced Walker Buehler's 29 straight starts without a loss. Which is a more impressive statistic? Buehler's stat or the fact that prior to last night, the Dodgers had not been shut out since September of 2019. Our account, Dodger Blue, tweeted that out. I refused to believe it. I had to go double check because I could not believe that was true. Which of those streaks was more impressive to you? 29 straight starts without a loss for Buehler or no shutouts against the Dodgers since September of 2019?
I'm gonna go with the second one just because that's an every game
Yeah.
type thing. Like Bueller's streak is obviously impressive, but he pitches every fifth game, so it's not nearly the sample size isn't nearly as large. And I know scoring one run isn't that hard especially when you got an offense like the Dodgers. But at the end of the day, it's the big
Yeah.
leagues. You think you're going to run into some good pitching, a good starting performance, a good bullpen performance, whatever. Like you have an off night, like those things happen. It's Major League Baseball. You're playing against really good teams. You're playing every single day. Like some days you just don't feel right physically, and
Yeah.
so for the Dodgers to go that long without getting shut out, like that's extremely impressive. It sucks that it came to an end last night, but last night was a perfect example of what I was just saying. Like they ran into a guy in Zach Wheeler who's been one of the best pitchers in baseball this season. He gives you 6 shutout innings, I believe, or 5, whatever it was. And then you run into the bullpen, a guy like Alvarado who's just up there from the left side throwing 102-mile-an-hour BBs.
Yeah.
He gives you 2 shutout innings as well. So it was just a perfect storm of good pitching. The Dodgers had an off night. They had they had a chance to score in the ninth inning there. Dave Roberts, I know you
Oh,
tweeted
trust
about
me.
it. I tweeted
This
about
is my next question.
it. Okay, so I guess it's a perfect segue. I guess that would have been their chance to score right there, and it just didn't happen. So yeah, I'm not too concerned about the shutout last night, but I'm just super impressed with the overall streak that took place.
I'm with you. It's more impressive. Again, I couldn't believe it had happened. So that's what I would go with. But last big deal or no deal is the scenario at the end of last night. You probably knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was going to ask you about this. So
Yeah.
here's the scenario. The Dodgers are down 2-0. They're facing a guy who can't throw strikes. He's all over the place. He has a terrible history in Dodger Stadium. Steven Souza Jr. is hit. He goes to first base with nobody out. Austin Barnes due up eighth. He was starting in this game, followed by the pitcher's spot. The Dodgers had Will Smith on the bench. They had Justin Turner on the bench. And the decision that Dave Roberts ended up making was to let Austin Barnes hit, to let Will Smith pinch hit, and to give Justin Turner a true off day, not allowing him to pinch hit in this situation. Well, things
Right.
played out exactly as I probably expected it to. Austin Barnes hits into a double play. Will Smith ends up getting hit by pitch. Mookie Betts flies out. Is this a big deal? Like should I be making much of this? To me, on one hand, I get the idea of an off day. How much stress is it on Justin Turner to go up there and take an at bat? You're down 2-0. You get Will Smith pinch hitting for Austin Barnes, huge upgrade. You have Justin Turner pinch hitting in the pitcher spot. To me, that feels like an obvious situation. I understand wanting to rest a guy, but in that situation, when you're already shorthanded offensively, I don't know. I just struggle to think, in a 2-run game, I want Austin Barnes hitting at any point.
Yeah, no, I definitely get where you're coming from. Like, especially when it's a case of it's the ninth
Yeah.
inning, the game is like literally on the line here. Like, we could come like we played poorly all night, and we could just kind of steal a win here with a couple good at bats against the guy who's struggled a lot at Dodger Stadium. Like that, as soon as he hits Souza, like that's got to be going through his
Yeah.
mind. So I think you kind of let him off the hook by throwing Barnes up there. And obviously, you hope for better results with Barnes. You hope he doesn't hit into a double play, but I don't think either of us were surprised when it
No.
happened. Like, I think that's just kind of what you expect with Austin Barnes. So I'm with you. I definitely think Turner could have taken one at bat there, and that kind of changes everything because then Smith is hitting for Barnes with no outs. And then you have Turner after that, and then the top of the order. So that's you like where you're at
Yeah.
with those guys coming up. You don't exactly like where you're at with Barnes. With all that being said, though, like if you're giving Justin Turner a full night off, you're playing with one less guy on the bench, then I'd say let's be a little more cautious about using our position players. Like it's the classic Dave Roberts. Like let's pinch hit a position player for a position player just to get the right matchup, and then you end up getting screwed down the line.
Yeah.
Like I think Albert Pujols came in for Matt Beatty earlier in the game. Like Andy Burns came in for McKinstry. Like there are a couple situations there where it's like if you don't pinch hit a position player for a position player, then maybe you have Albert Pujols to hit for Albert Barnes in that situation. I know he's just as likely to hit into a double play there, but he's also more likely to leave the ballpark
Yeah.
and tie the game. So I definitely think if you're gonna have Justin Turner taking a full night off, and that's the case from the first pitch on, then let's be a little more cautious with how we use the rest of our
It's a
bench.
great point.
That's where I.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's a great point. I mean, we've talked about the player for player, position player for position player subs. Dave Roberts likes to do, and it comes back to bite him multiple times. So let me get you out of here. This one mailbag question that came in I thought was fascinating. Ismail Rivera on Twitter. This was a mailbag. I don't think LA needs another bat at the deadline. What do you think about an Aroldis Chapman trade for Keibert Ruiz? I don't know if New York are selling. They should. I think that would be a fair trade for both, especially with Gary Sanchez not living up to the hype. Some context here. The Yankees are currently 35-32. They're 7 games back of the Rays, 1 game back of the Red Sox. Chapman, 1.78 ERA this season, 14 saves. He's been fantastic. He has allowed earned runs in just 2 out of 27 appearances. So we're talking about hey, if Bickford only allows a run once every 5 appearances, so what? Chapman is once every 13 and a half appearances right now. He is due $15 million this year. He's under contract next year for $18 million at age 33 and 34. Let me start here. If the Yankees were sellers, I doubt they will be, but if the Yankees were sellers, would you be interested in a Ruiz for Chapman type of deal, knowing the age, knowing the contract situation, etc.?
Yeah. I think that if the Yankees are sellers is a big if. That we'll see, I guess, a month from now where they're at, but they're not out of it by any means. 35-32 isn't great, but if you have, a strong week, you're right back in it. And it's the Yankees, of course. Like, I don't know how you could, the fan base is going to be pretty pissed off if you start, selling off your best reliever when you're a 500 team still in the mix. So I guess that's a big if. But if they were, I still don't necessarily see Chapman as the right fit. We've already seen the Dodgers trade for that guy once and then, renege out of it just because of the off the field issues with Chapman. He has a history with domestic violence. So if they didn't want to trade for him, back then when he was in his prime, I don't know if I don't know if they're going to change that stance now, even though he's still really good. You mentioned the numbers. He's been outstanding this year. He still throws super hard. He'd be a great addition to the bullpen. I just don't know if he's the guy the Dodgers front office is going to go out and get. I also don't know if they're in a rush to trade Keibert Ruiz for a reliever, like the way he's been mashing at AAA. I think his stock is definitely rising, and I think if you're going to part with someone like that, you're looking for a position player or starting pitcher. I think relievers, their value is kind of capped just because they don't pitch all that often. Like Chapman, if you're trading for Chapman, he's going to give you 30 innings the rest of the year. Like that's not adding a whole lot of value. And I know it's great for the postseason, like having Chapman at the back end of your bullpen with all the other guys they have. Like that's a scary bullpen. I just think there are other cheaper options out there as far as the bullpen is concerned. Like you could find solid bullpen help and not have to give up a Keibert Ruiz, and that way you could save Ruiz either for a bigger type of trade for a position player or for a starter, or you keep Ruiz because he's been mashing right now. He's got 6 homers in the last couple of weeks. I'd honestly love to see him be called up. We talked about Austin Barnes, plenty. I think I'd love to see Ruiz get another chance in the big leagues just because we've never really seen him get a true chance. And I'm not saying he should be the starter or anything. Like, obviously we love Will Smith, but I'd like to see him be called up and get a couple starts a week here just to see what they really have before you even consider trading him. Because if he's a future star, I don't know if that's someone you really want to deal. So I'd like to see him get at least one more opportunity between now and the deadline just to kind of see what he brings to the table.
Yeah, and he's a guy. I'm connecting with Justin Lorber later this afternoon. That'll get posted in the next couple of days. But he's a guy I'd love to hear sort of what the tweak has been. Yeah, Chapman to me is interesting because on one hand, he's as elite of a reliever as you can go and get. I think we all agree that relief pitcher is probably the biggest need if the Dodgers are going to go make a move. As far as from an impact, what's fascinating about Chapman is you're not necessarily getting a guy below market value. I mean, you're paying him $33 million over 2 years. So that's the hard part for me to stomach. It's like, if you're going to give up a Ruiz for a relief pitcher, at least let it be a guy who's under contract for a few years and who is undervalued, even if it's arbitration type years where it's like you're paying him 60 to 70% of his value rather than 100% of his value. Again, Chapman's been really good, though, and so, it's kind of like pick your poison, if you want an elite reliever, it's going to cost for you. I think the big headline, which you said, I just can't imagine the Yankees making this move. They're 3 games over 500. Everybody in baseball makes the playoffs, it feels like, a lot of these years, and so Yeah, I mean, they're one game back of second place in the division. I just can't see them doing it. I mean, I'm sure they'd like to get out of that contract. If they could add a guy like Ruiz, who's a major league ready, top 100 prospect catcher. I think the pieces are there. I also agree with you. The Dodgers value chemistry a lot. And I don't know how Chapman fits into that based on some of the stuff comments the Dodgers as an organization have made following that trade you referenced falling through a number of years ago. So I like the idea. I like I mean, I've always kind of hinted at a Ruiz for Hader type deal, which is a very similar sort of to what we're looking at here. I think the cost financially would be a little bit different, but I like the idea. I've always said if I'm going to trade for somebody, I would like it to be an elite reliever and not a middle reliever type guy. But we'll see. I mean, maybe the Dodgers get Knebel back and feel like they've got 4 or 5 leverage guys they trust, and they don't feel like there's enough value added in an elite guy. We'll see. Obviously, you get complicated with Jansen if you trade for Chapman. Jansen's not the closer anymore. How does he feel about that? I can already tell you, not good. So lots to navigate. Maybe they could trade Ruiz and Jansen for Chapman or something like that. Send Jansen in return. So we swap closers. Jansen's out of his contract at the end of this season. You sort of, I don't know, maybe that would soften the blow there. But anyways, well, that'll do it for us. We're over the hour mark. So if you're still watching, we appreciate you watching. Like I said, couple episodes coming up after we post this one. Justin Lorber and I are going to chat for 15 to 20 minutes about the state of the minor league system and how that has gone the first month or two of the season. Rob and I will be back tomorrow with the series preview for the Diamondbacks, where we all cross our fingers and hope the Dodgers don't lose 2 out of 3 to the Diamondbacks, as I think most of us pessimistic Dodger fans feel might happen. So we'll do a preview of that. And then Daniel and I will be back next week. So no live post-game show this weekend. My schedule's been crazy. Apologies for that. Next week, we'll get on to a more normal schedule where we record at the beginning of the week, live show towards the end of the week. So we appreciate you joining us as always. That's Daniel Starkand. I'm Jeff Spiegel. Check out Dodger Blue 1958. Everyone, social media, DodgerBlue.com. Please subscribe here. Ring the notification bell. Tell your friends. We really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. As always, Vin Scully taking us home.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.